Hi, everyone, and welcome to S&C Sidebar, where we talk with our different partners about some of the most interesting legal issues they've seen in their careers and what they are seeing on the horizon, among other topics. Today, we are joined by Jonathan Carter, who has been a partner in the litigation group since 2021. Jonathan's practice focuses on both complex commercial litigation and regulatory investigations. He has handled, among others, high-stakes antitrust cases for Barclays, Goldman Sachs, and Royal Bank of Canada. He also successfully resolved the largest ever spoofing-related investigation. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it's really fun to talk to you today. Before we dive into my list of questions, why don't you just give us a little bit about your own path to partnership?
Yeah. So I always had a desire to come and live in New York and decided in the first summer of my law school experience to try out a big firm, and turned out that I came here and absolutely loved it. Didn't expect that I would stay forever, but wound up loving the client relationships that I built, the relationships with other partners, and decided I wanted to make my career here.
Yeah, that feels very similar to my own path, so I really understand that. For me, I think part of what kept me here through my associate years was just how fascinating the cases were. Maybe you could tell us about some of the cases that have been most interesting to you, or some of the most interesting issues that you've had to work on during your career.
Yeah. So I'm really cut from the classic S&C generalist model. And I spent my whole career at the firm, exception of the 2 clerkships. And I've really developed a pretty diverse practice across a diverse range of clients. That's allowed me to be effective and achieve results both before regulators and the bench. A lot of my focus recently has been on antitrust and market manipulation class actions. It's an area that I really, really love. I think one of the more interesting cases that I've worked on recently, you mentioned at the top of our session here that I had the privilege of representing a large financial institution resolving the largest ever spoofing-related investigation and a raft of follow-on litigation that came after. And it was really an interesting case for a number of reasons. And first, the crime of spoofing was relatively new and ill-defined, based in large part on trader intent. So on top of our advocacy in that case, we were effectively developing the law of spoofing in real time and figuring out what types of evidence were relevant to prove up this type of conduct. And that was obviously challenging, but also deeply satisfying at the same time. I think the second aspect that made it interesting was that the resolution we achieved in that case was a great example of the generalist model at work. We brought together regulatory, policy, tax, employment, and civil litigation experts to devise a resolution that really best positioned our client for the onslaught of civil litigation that would follow that settlement, including a CEA class action, a securities class action, a series of derivative cases, and various employment actions. Just to give an example, we worked successfully with DOJ to create a victim compensation fund, which offset a lot of those civil claims. And we negotiated admissions that would avoid the pitfalls that you often see in follow-on civil litigation. And our generalist model allowed us to do that seamlessly, to really combine the expertise of the firm to get the best possible result.
So it sounds like S&C's generalist approach is something you really weave into all aspects of your practice. Is that fair?
It is. I really see the generalist model as having at least 2 facets. First, it's how we train. So rather than have young associates pick a lane early, we give them the broadest possible foundation. And that makes us more creative. That makes us more nimble. That makes us more comfortable practicing in the gray areas. I joined the firm during the height of financial crisis litigation. And that's a period that defined, I think, a whole generation of lawyers.
For sure.
And really the reaction to that litigation helped shape the legal departments of many of our clients in many ways. Second, I think the generalist model is how we practice and how we achieve the results that we do. So my docket is pretty diverse and multidisciplinary, and new things help keep me sharp, help me be creative, to draw connections, to develop strategies that benefit my clients. And I also think the generalist model shapes our culture. It encourages collaboration and cross-pollination of ideas. Our practices are never siloed. We don't develop the kinds of many fiefdoms that prevent colleagues from working closely together and exchanging ideas. I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree with that more. Switching topics a little bit, you have this great broad practice and you see things from a lot of angles. Is there anything you're seeing at the moment, any high-level legal developments in the areas where you work that you think clients or others should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so I think the change in administration's on everyone's mind. And on the federal level, I think it's safe to say that we're likely to see a bit of a slowdown in enforcement actions, at least outside of the consumer protection context. The question then is whether state regulators will try to fill that gap. And I think on the civil side, that could make antitrust litigation, the area that I practice in most, interesting. So typically in periods with more active enforcement regimes, the plaintiff's bar follows the lead of regulators, bringing class actions on the heels of enforcement actions. When there's a slowdown, the plaintiff's bar sometimes gets more creative, and I think we're likely to see that, particularly an uptick in data-driven antitrust and market manipulation cases. Those are cases where plaintiffs' lawyers mine publicly available trading data and fashion complaints without reference to parallel enforcement actions by the government. And I think we could also see these state AGs who are looking to become more prominent in this environment and maybe potentially lacking resources, tying their horses to the private plaintiff's bar and bringing class actions.
You know, I've had the privilege of watching you a little bit during your career. In addition to just being a terrific lawyer, there are two areas where you have always particularly shown. One is how you work with clients, and two is how you develop associates. So focusing a little bit on the first, so what would you say is the most important part of working with clients to foster such a strong and productive relationship?
Yeah, I think for starters, it begins with the quality of the work. Everything that comes off your desk, every piece of advice has to meet our standards of excellence. But I think that's also only half the story, and we have to recognize that. You have to have a deep understanding of the client's business needs to place that advice in the commercial context in which that legal problem arises. And I think that's really the key. The second thing, it really is about building relationships, and relationships that are built on integrity and trust. I think my philosophy, if you want to call it that, is to come in each day and think, what is one thing I can take off my client's plate today? What can I do today to make my client look good in front of her boss or the CEO or the board?
And focusing on the work I know you do, developing associates. Do you have any advice? Maybe we'll leave it here, but any advice that you have for associates who are looking to become a partner?
So I think it's a similar set of themes. It begins with excellent work. Anything you put your name on should meet your standards. So take ownership of anything that crosses your desk, take it to the finish line, and work to understand your clients and their business, not just the law. And like I said, to build relationships that are based on trust. Plant seeds that may not germinate for years. Today's colleague sitting next to you might be a client tomorrow. So build those relationships for the long term.
That's so great. Great advice. No surprise. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.